So listen, no, it's great to see you all, and thanks for coming along. As I say, I'll just repeat again for people who've just come on. The session is being recorded. You can see that clearly anyway, so that people who can't make it can have a look at it too. Anyway, it's great to see all of you, and hopefully the sun is shining wherever you are. I wasn't giving out about it being warm earlier, so I wasn't. Yeah, well listen, as I say, it's great to see you, and we're here today. It's just a short event, as you know, half an hour, and we really try to keep to the time. We're a little bit late starting, but we'll try to keep to it. And today we're launching, as you know, the CityWide podcast. So very briefly, I mean, I think most of you here know about CityWide and what it's about, but just I suppose briefly, CityWide has now been, it's been around since 1995. We had kept saying 25 years. It actually is now 28 years, which is fairly terrifying. It's a network of community organizations, community activists in addressing, who are working on addressing the drugs issue in their communities. And again, it's very, very much, we always say this, it's when we talk about community, we are including people who use drugs, we are including families, and it's very much in solidarity, everyone working together. And again, as people will know, we've had a long partnership with our friends in the traveller community, and with the LGBTI plus community as well. And in more recent years, we've also had a partnership with our friends in the migrant and ethnic minority communities. So yeah, so I think and obviously, very obviously, what CityWide about is a community development approach to the drugs issue. And what that means basically is that we believe very, very strongly that the people who are most impacted by the issue are the people who should be central to developing the responses, to developing and implementing the responses. So I think that the kind of the launch of the podcast today, it very much fits in with that kind of community development approach. And I suppose just briefly, the background to why we decided to do it. As a lot of you here will know, in recent years, it has been challenging to have the community voice heard. It has, yeah, you can be heard if you are saying what they want to hear, but you're not heard if you're saying anything different. And we've been discussing this, several of you would have been involved in the discussions about the need for us to have a space where we can talk openly and honestly about what is actually going on, and then maybe get that out to a wider audience, a sense of what's actually happening on the ground. So yeah, and that actually is important to say, we have been looking at that before the Citizens Assembly started, because we felt it was something that's really important to do anyway. But then obviously with the Citizens Assembly starting, that kind of created an opportunity to link into that as well, both to have the stories heard and to kind of bring them to a wider audience. So yeah, so I suppose the starting point for us, again, very briefly, and the document is up on our website. What we did first, we just did kind of an update of the community story, and it's really, I mean, I won't go into detail on it because you can have a read of it. But it's absolutely crucial that we frame all of our discussions in the community story, because particularly so when you're doing something like a podcast or when people are telling stories, it can be easy to individualize it and say, well, this is about an individual person. But obviously, and we were absolutely 100% clear that you can't look at an individual story without being aware of and understanding the community context. So that's a crucial point for us. So the community story document, I suppose, in terms of an update, in some ways, it's like that phrase, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We know in some ways there has been huge changes, shifts in around the drugs issue over the last long number of years, but also there have been things that have stayed the same. So in the document we see, obviously, initially we're looking at the working class communities that through the 80s, 90s into 2000s were so impacted by heroin, and we know that those still are the communities where the worst impacts are felt. And it's, I know people sometimes say, look, you know, we know that story, that's we've heard all that before, and really that just isn't true. That because you can't, there's no way to describe, I don't know how you describe the impact of generational continuing compounding the situation in those communities where the impact of the drugs issue it's just impacted on every single aspect of people's lives, and it's just become part of community life, and and it's, as I say, it's passing on from generation. So it's not the same, because you can't, it's now that it's so embedded, and it is heartbreaking that is what's happened. And we really need to understand that it's now a far more challenging problem than it ever was, because of that kind of the fact that it's gone on for so long and it has become embedded. And again, the overall issues there of the kind of economic underdevelopment and disadvantage that have been in those communities. We haven't seen the responses to those, and obviously as a result of that, the drugs trade is now one of the major economic activities in a lot in those areas. So again, obviously, we also look in the document. It clearly we know there's drug issues in middle class communities, and that the impact is different. You don't see the same kind of impact at community level, but obviously in terms of individuals and families, it does have an impact. And very clearly, our current approach has a really negative impact on those families as well. And one of the major impacts it has is the silence and the stigma. That, you know, which means that it's not talked about and it's not openly acknowledged. Similar, we know from our friends in towns outside of Dublin, in rural areas, that really the approach we have, and they're all very clear. The drugs issue, the drug use, drugs trade, it's affecting every part of the country, every kind of village, town. But the impact of our current approach is silencing. Everywhere the words that come up are about silence about what's happening. So this is, I suppose, why we're saying now at this point, and I should mention too, sorry, quickly, that obviously there's particular communities. They used to call them communities of interest, I don't know, but we clearly have to acknowledge, like for travellers, you're looking at it's probably increasing levels of racism against travellers. We look at our migrant and ethnic minority communities, who, you know, we all know the kind of awful stuff that's going on, and our LGBTI community. It's heartbreaking. Like, just a few years after a referendum, that young LGBT plus people in Dublin or in other parts of the country, they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe going out. So we have a whole, all of our communities are being so affected by and drug use, obviously, in that context, is something that becomes a problem, an issue for people, a way of coping with that. So we have, across all of our communities, drugs is an issue. And for the Citizens Assembly, so what we're saying very clearly is everybody now needs to be part of that discussion. So what we're going to do now is, and as I say, that the document around the community story is on the website. It's not very detailed. It needs an awful lot more detail in it. But if you want to have a look at it, it's just kind of our initial document. Also mention young people, because young people are very, very clear that they have absolutely no opportunity or space to speak openly and honestly about the drugs issue. And that's something that's a big, major issue as well across all communities. So we're going to go to the short video now. I think Tom has it lined up there.
As a society, we recognise that our current policies around drugs are not working, and that there is a need for change. In Ireland, over 900,000 people have used an illegal drug, yet we marginalise and isolate people through stigma and shame. To help shape change, we want to hear from people with direct experiences of the impact of our policies on their lives. People who use drugs, their family members, and community workers in areas most affected. But it's not easy for them to tell their stories. There are a lot of barriers in place, making it extremely scary and damaging for a person to speak up.
I'm a person who uses drugs, and I'd like to tell you my story, so you can understand why. But sometimes telling my story can seem impossible.
It's your own fault. You decided to take the drugs in the first place.
There's no such thing as recreational drug use. It's all bad.
Look at what you're putting your family through.
Shame on you.
I'm a mother whose child is using drugs, and I'd like to tell you my story. But I'm afraid people won't understand.
I blame the parents. It's their fault.
You should keep this to yourself. The whole town will know.
You're bringing shame on the whole family.
Your child is going to end up in trouble with the police.
I'm a community worker in an area that's hugely affected by the impact of drugs. I'd like to tell you my community story so you know what it's really like. But I'm afraid it could do more damage than good.
Stop giving our community a bad name.
People already look down on us around here.
And what about the people who sell the drugs?
What about the people who sell drugs?
And what about the people who sell the drugs?
Speaking out about drug use and the impact of drug laws and legislation can be frightening. But now with the Citizens' Assembly, we have this opportunity to have a positive conversation about drugs. You might not see their faces or know their names, but you'll hear their voices, voices of ordinary people, just like you, and how their experiences of drug use can help improve supports, services, and community engagement. It's time to make things better for all of us. It's time for change.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And again, the video now will be up. It'll be up on social media and our websites and stuff. So we just encourage people to share it as much as possible. Again, it's very much about that message, the Citizens' Assembly, the discussion around the drugs issue. It's for everybody, and we want everyone to be involved in it and participate in it. And as I say, circulate it as widely as you can. And again, I suppose what comes very clearly from the video, again, it's that message of how the shame and the blame and the stigma and the criminalisation, it affects everybody, regardless of background, where they're coming from. And it's like this catch-22, isn't it? Because when you've got blame and stigma and criminalisation, that leads to silence. And when we get silence, then the problems they do get worse. And we need to hear the stories now to understand what is exactly going on, the impact on people and what needs to change. And we can see it again. We were just talking there and before we started about the Citizens' Assembly and people who've spoken there. And you can see it really, really clearly in that process that when people who have experienced these issues speak, the members of the Assembly, they really, really are taken. And that's because, again, as we all know, the reasons we can have policies that stigmatize people, that shame them and blame them, is because as a society we can other people. We can say they're different to us, wouldn't happen to us, wouldn't happen to our friends. So we other them. And I think it's amazing. And you literally can see it happen at the Citizens' Assembly, where the members of it, when they hear people who are talking about their own experience, it has a major impact on them. So we do believe that is something really important, that to a kind of a wider audience, we need to get out the stories of what is actually happening for people. But again, as you see in the video, it's an incredibly difficult thing for people to do. But despite all of the challenges, we have 5 amazing people, some of who are on the call today, and 5 amazing people who have been generous enough to share their stories. And again, I suppose it's really, really important to say this, like, there are people who've reflected on their experience and have become involved in trying to bring about change. But it's absolutely crucial to say that is because they've been involved for a long time in community development. And it's not something, so it's not a case of that you go out there and find people. The people emerged, and there are people who've been involved in community development for a long time. And that's really where the strength of the stories comes from, because they have this reflection on their own experience and are involved in trying to bring about change. So that community development, it couldn't happen unless all those years of community development had happened, I suppose. Again, I say the process, I mean, it's huge risks for people in terms of telling their stories, regardless. I mean, there's risks in terms of maybe other people and their families or friends. But there's also the sense of control, that once a story is out there, it can be out of your control and it could be used in ways that you're not happy about. So developing and really focusing on an ethical way of storytelling was crucial to us. And again, there's sort of just a short document on it, which we put up on the website. And I'm going to come to Claire in a moment just to talk a bit more about how that worked. But that was a crucial part of what it was about. Just very briefly, because I'm going on way too long, just a few things about the 5 different episodes. I won't go into any detail because you listen to them. They are anonymized. Again, that wasn't necessarily something the people involved were insisting on, but we just felt as a principle that we should start that way and do it that way. The titles, I just have to, I'm not going to read it. Well, I could, I have a list here of women, men, where they're from. I'm not going to read that. You'll find all that out when you listen to them. Just the labels and the titles on them, I think are really good. The title of the first one is The Ruler and the Poet. And again, when you listen to it, you figure out why that is the title. And the second one is The Fire in Me Belly. Again, when you listen to it. Creating from Chaos is the third one. Rebel with the Cause is the fourth one, and On My Dad's Shoulders is the fifth one. So all of those titles are coming from what people spoke to us about and are their words. So yeah, and I'll come back to it, but they're brilliant. They're all brilliant interviews. So I'm going to hand over to Claire now, who is going to talk to you a bit about the process, in which she was really, really very, very involved. Okay, Claire.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. Yeah, so I'm a community organizer and a researcher, a social science researcher. So a lot of what I do is I work alongside communities and different groups of people in trying to tell their story. That's what research is to me. It's trying to tell a truth. It's trying to tell people's story to contribute to some kind of change. That's usually the kind of work that I'm involved in. And then I also do producing. So I'm involved in, media type work where people's stories are told in a very different way. And I've been involved, like I've gone on and done TV interviews and radio interviews, and you're given a couple of minutes. That's all you get. You walk away and you might, you will 10 seconds later, why didn't I say this? Why didn't I say that? Probably shouldn't have said that. I might have went too far. And there's such a lack of ownership over agency and when you tell your story. So to get the opportunity to do something like this with Anna, first of all, who's been absolutely incredible to work with. But I know because of the support of their own trust, the amount of time that's been available for this to give to people has been incredible. So we basically went in and we met everybody. Anna sent me over the community story document, and the ethical framework was there. Like, the people involved in this process have created that ethical framework. So it's coming directly from the people who are then going to share their story. So we sat down, myself, Anna, and then one person at a time, and we just had a conversation about, what is the story you want to tell? Like, what's the message you want to share with people? And obviously it's a podcast, and we try to keep it as close to 30 minutes as possible because people, tend to kind of tune out, we think, after about 40 minutes of a podcast. But we had a conversation about what that message would look like. And then we had about an hour, 2 hours sometimes conversation. And then I put together a list of very kind of brief questions in terms of, what do you think of this in terms of keeping us to a structure that you'll get to be able to say everything you want to say? So I sent that over to everybody individually, and then we worked back and forward. So it was a conversation in terms of each individual inputting into that, and then coming to a place where we're like, right, this is our starting point. And then we went into the room, and when we went into the recording space, we also had, I think we had triple the amount of time we really needed to make sure that people could stop whenever they needed. They could go out and have a drink, come back, or we could start all over again, and obviously some of what we're talking about is quite emotional. So it's trying to take a kind of trauma-informed approach as well, to be able to say, like, you're not on our time clock here. Like, we're not, looking at the clock the whole time saying, right, we have to finish in 10 minutes, kind of get to the point, which I know some of the people involved said they've experienced before, and I know I certainly have. So we had those conversations, and then afterwards we went in, and also people knew that we were going to be editing this, and they were going to have full control over the edit. So if they stumbled over something, they didn't feel like they had to just keep going. They could stop, they could go back, they could restart. And I think that was really important, just even in terms of people's comfort, to know it's not whatever I say here is going to be going out and that's the end of it. So then we got into the edit process, and we had each interview transcribed. And then, so we did a first edit that was based on anonymity. So we made sure we had a couple of different eyes on it at all times to make sure any identifying information was taken out. And like Anna said, some people didn't necessarily want that, but all of the people that have done this series, have huge experience, such as structural analysis. They've a lot of them have spoken out publicly as well. But the idea is that this will go on, and maybe people will end up telling their story that don't have that, and that ethical framework is there to make sure that it's possible for everyone, basically. So in the edit process, then we had the first transcription and we had the first audio edit, and then we sent it back to everybody. And if some people were just happy with that, they didn't want to make any edits, and then we just cut it down basically for time wise to make sure it was kind of around the 35 minute mark. And then some people came back and they might have said, oh, do you know what, actually, I said something here, and can you take that out? Or could we move this around? It'll make a bit more sense. And so people just had full ownership over how their story was told. And we made sure that by the time it goes out today, so it'll be out there in about 5 minutes, that everybody was comfortable with it. And really, that it was just every step of the way trying to make sure that people had full ownership. And also they knew that if it came to 12 o'clock today and they decided they didn't want to be a part of it, that was absolutely fine too. And that was rooted in it right from the start, that everybody gets full on, there's no conditions attached to this, because you can't do that. You can't half-arse it, basically. You can't say, oh, well, we're going to give you agency. And like Anna has already said, we rely on people telling their stories to contribute to change in this country so often. Anytime real change happens, that it comes from personal stories, but there's almost always a cost attached. It's extractive, it's exploitative, and people, there's a risk attached. So we're just trying to minimize that as much as possible and make sure that the people whose stories are actually benefiting everybody aren't being exploited and aren't being extracted from. So yeah, that's pretty much how we conducted it. But it's been incredible. The people were incredible. I think everyone's going to really be impacted by the stories, and it's just been amazing to work with Anna on it and everybody involved. I think you can unmute yourself there.
Thanks so much, Claire. It's excellent.
Sorry about that. I was messing around with my, anyway, yeah, I'm unmuted. Listen, Tan, I'm going to come back to Claire in the thank you. So yeah, rather than start singing your praises now, I'm going to come back to you in the thank yous, Claire. Don't you worry. Did an absolutely amazing job. Okay, listen, we're nearly at the end. I actually don't have my agenda in front of me, but I remember it. So we are in. Oh, sorry, Andy. God, Andy. I was really going to say we're at the what's now. Andy, sorry about that. Shows you now I do need my agenda in front of me. I put it down to the heat. I don't function in these. Listen, I'm delighted to say Andy O'Hara from Ishka, who I think most of you will know, is just going to say a few words. Again, it's really, back to the point I was making earlier on, how important it is for us to be working all the time in solidarity with people who use drugs and their families. At the moment, we know there is actually no network for the families at this stage, and that's something that really needs to be addressed. But Andy and Ishka are involved in, in terms of process and the work they're doing in some amazing stuff. So just Andy's just going to say a couple of, he's just going to, now that I've remembered, he's going to say a few words. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, look, it's great to be to be engaged with with CityWide, because it's the principles and values are closely aligned, and like it's always important to ask, why is there an Ishka and why is there a CityWide? They both started in the 90s because it was recognised the people who have the most experience and who are most impacted by the policies we have were not part of the conversation. So it's really about change. And it's about how we get there. We always say in the organisation, it's really about power. It's all about power. Who has power and who doesn't? And we'll always say, we have the stakeholders up here, the policymakers, the state, the services. And down here, we'll generally have people who use drugs in the communities they come from. So it's how do we close the gap? And it's the process that we'll always focus on. We won't sacrifice the process for anything, because we know when we have a strong process, we'll always have the strongest outcome. And it's really important that, when we're building peer-led processes, we're really trying to build them around people, because I think there's a belief out there that people who use drugs and the communities they come from are just a problem that people in power may decide to fix or may not. And it's really about saying, no, do you know what? We are the solution. We have to be driving the solution. So that has to start from the ground up. And I think the term meeting people where they're at is widely used, but I think it's being colonized a little bit. And I think that this campaign will help us try and re-energize and try and promote activism from the ground up again. And it's just interesting that at the Citizens Assembly on the weekend, there was a question. There was some contributions from people who are kind of saying, look, what's currently being done is working. And like we know from here that from 20, 30 years ago, a lot of the stuff that's been implemented hasn't worked. And it hasn't worked because it hasn't been built around the people who are the most impacted. And what was really interesting and powerful, just in case, because I think for a lot of us, we get a little bit demoralized, is that there was a key question from the assembly, and they basically asked whoever it was that said, I won't name the person. They said, why are we here? Why are we having an assembly? Do you know what I mean? So the public know, the people know. It's about how do we generate the fight back and how do we re-energize an activist movement, which CityWide have been central to. So I'm looking forward to seeing this campaign and being part of it and supporting it going forward.
Great, thanks a million, Andy, and well done on all the work you're doing in Ishka. It's amazing. And again, just that it perfectly leads to it's kind of what happens next. And we're very, very clear that this is only the start of a process, that these kind of 5 podcasts are the beginning. Obviously, it's something new for us, and we'll see how it goes and review it and all that. But we certainly do. And we're totally aware that we 5 people, and we're nowhere near being inclusive of everybody out there and all of the different voices and stuff. And obviously, as time goes on, that's something we'd really like, to be able to have more people involved and to have that space however we work it out, where people can't feel they can actually talk about what's actually happening on the ground and the reality of it, and that they can be listened to. So very definitely, like these 5 podcasts, our plan is very much that this is just the start, and that there will be more, and that we'll continue with it. So so I mean, and again, the obvious things about what's next is we want to get as many people as possible out there listening to the podcast. So again, all of you who are here, that'll be obviously the first thing. I'm not sure if the message is in the chat about
It
is great. Claire has a message in the chat there about, again, if people can share on social media, on your websites, and just encourage as many people, just everybody to listen to the podcast. All 5 of them are live now, if that's the right expression, and you decide to put all 5 of them up, but we will over the next number of weeks send out specific kind of promotional stuff around each of them. But we felt it was important just to put all 5 up there, so you don't have to listen to them all in one go, but they're all up there. And again, as I say, if you want to look in the chat there, you'll see all of the important stuff like hashtags. It's Untold Stories is the hashtag, with capital U and a capital S. And looking at it, we noticed that gives us the word us, which is really nice, isn't it? I know that's a bit cheesy, but I really thought it was nice. So that's it now. Is just help us to get as many people as possible to listen to the videos. This is just the initial launch, and we'll be circulating this video of the launch as well to all the mailing lists, and we will be continuing to promote through social media in particular over the next number of weeks. So every share you can do, or tweet, or any of those things, whatever, is really helpful for us. So getting them out there and listened to, because they're amazing stories, so they need to be listened to.
Sorry, Anna, just to say I have them up on the website now as well, so people can link through the website to them.
Yeah, and we'll keep everything updated on the CityWide website too, so if anybody wants to update them, they can go there too. So again, just I mean, what the last thing I have to do now is just say thank yous to people, and for this I have to use my list. Considering I nearly forgot Andy speaking, I've no hope at all of me remembering all the people I have to thank without my list. Alfonso Films, that's Claire, Emma and Joe, and Claire in particular, Claire Byrne, who produced the film, the video, which is just, it's an amazing job on it. And the animation is actually done by a group probably isn't the right word. The name is And Maps and Plans. I know that sounds, but that's their actual name. And Carla kind of coordinated their role in it around the animation, and I'm sure you'll agree the animation is amazing. So they did an amazing job. And Emmett Kerwin, who did the voiceover for us, he couldn't be here today, but he was very happy to be part of it. And I have to say again, in Alfonso Films, they were hugely helpful in developing the ideas for the podcast, even because it wasn't something I had any experience in. So they were massively helpful.
Thank you, Anna. Joe here from Alfonso.
You're welcome. And Pat again is here, Pat Montague, who's been doing a lot of the social media stuff and media stuff for us. And Tom, who's looked after this meeting. Thank you, Tom, for the technical stuff. The Rowan Trust, I have to mention, again, Claire already mentioned them, but we wouldn't have been able to do this without the support of the Rowan Trust, and just the amazing kind of openness and flexibility they have around the use of the funding, which really enables us to kind of do it in the way that Claire described. It's fantastic. So I know Michael Barron, who lots of you will know, is here from the Rowan Trust. So again, a huge thanks to them. And the last two final, the nearly last thank you has to be to Claire O'Connor. I mean, myself and Claire didn't know each other before we started this, and I feel like, I think like we're friends for life. Claire may not feel like that, and even though she said it was amazing working with me, I am the most ignorant person about social media and technological stuff that you have ever met in your life. And I'm sure Claire really wants to say, Jesus, working with her was an absolute nightmare, because I didn't even understand the language. Claire has just been absolutely amazing on this project. And she did all of the interview, but all of the other work she described that, and she has just she has just put her heart and soul into it, and it's just been fantastic to work with her. Yeah, and I just really, really want to thank her for like for just contributing way over anything you could have expected. She's just been amazing. So you'll be involved in the next ones, Claire. I'm sorry you can't get out of it. So thanks to Claire. And then finally, obviously, and I'm not going to name them because they're anonymous, the 5 people who have done these podcasts. And again, as we've said, like even people who, you know, may be relatively experienced and have years of experience and stuff, it is, I mean, in the process of doing the interviews, like it's a huge thing to ask. If it really is, because it's people's lives. It's like the generosity and the courage of people, their willingness to be involved in this. It just kind of words fail me. Like they're just amazing people, absolutely amazing people. And in the end of the day, despite all, because, you know, there are a lot of challenges, and we do at times despair a bit about some of the things that are being said, some of the policies that are being followed, and will we ever get changed? But to be honest, the five people involved in this, people like them, they give me hope. They just give me hope that yes, we are going to change. We are, and all of you are. We are going to change. You know, we are. It's going to happen. So that's it. You didn't go too far over time anyway, considering we started a little bit late. So basically, you have to all go out there now and do your homework, and just make sure you get loads of people to listen to the podcasts. And
we're just going to share the promo clip for the actual podcast before we go.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to end on. We're going to say just thank you to all for being here today. And as I say, I know you'll all get it out there. And so we'll finish now. Tom is going to play the promo clip, give you a sneak preview. So thanks, everyone. Hiya, my name is Anna Quigley, and I'd like to welcome you to our podcast by CityWide Drugs Crisis Campaign, Untold Stories. CityWide is a network of community organisations across the country, really, that are responding to the impact of drugs in our communities for the last 25 years now. This is a really important time for us in looking at the drugs issue. First of all, because we're finally recognising that the way we approach the drugs issue in Ireland is not working, and we have the Citizens' Assembly set up now by the government to look at how we should change the way we're responding. And obviously we've got the 99 members of the Assembly who are working away, doing really good work in there. But for us, it's really, really important that we're all part of this discussion, that we're all part of this conversation, because this issue, the drugs issue, it affects us all. So on this podcast, you're going to hear from people. They're all people who are active in their communities as a result of their own direct experience around drugs. And that could be that they use drugs themselves, it could be a family member use drugs, or it could be just because they've seen the impact overall that drugs have in their community. And they're all people who want to bring about change as a result of their own experience. So we think these are really important stories. We'd like to really thank the people who are telling us these stories. And the stories that you hear on this podcast, they will be anonymous. And that's because the current policy that we have, unfortunately, shame, blame, stigma, and criminalisation are all part of that policy. So you'll understand that this can be difficult for people to be identified.
And you've got people around you, you've got your friends, you've got other family members who love you deeply. And they see how thin you're getting, how worried you are, how you're not sleeping well at night, how you jump when your phone rings, and they're so worried about you. And they're saying, back off, stop, leave them be, let them go. But you can't. It's so hard to let the person you love so deeply go.
Like, I've been on my dad's shoulder in the marches. I was about 6. When I was about 20, the knock was at my mother's door to tell her not to have me in the house. But it did not deter me from using drugs. None of the policies deterred me from using drugs. Picking up convictions didn't deter me from using drugs. If anything, it made me use drugs underground and in danger.
Very sadly, I remember saying to people, the situation outside of Dublin is reminiscent of Dublin in the late 70s, early 80s. That this issue is being ignored it's not being responded to. It's as if Dublin never happened.
The same things are happening to young people and their families that happened to me 30 years ago.
Don't just look at somebody and say, look, the state of him. Well, the state of him is in direct proportion to the hurt he's had. So just look at that, look twice. That's what I say to you.